Right, anyway, yeah, so what I was saying, and obviously you could just see me gesticulating, is I haven't particularly got a fully fleshed out agenda for this one. I'm testing the water. It's only the third one, but I like talking about Magento. I know people like hearing about Magento, and it's, you know, it's a subject close to my heart, but I'm not just a dev. I like to talk about with colleagues and peers about what's going on in the industry, and what, you know, obviously I'm from the UK. It may be different, for I know I've got subscribers from all over the world, which is brilliant, and I know Magento is a global CMS platform, but obviously I talk to people around the UK, and one of the things that we often get onto is the industry in and of itself of web development and programming, and how Magento fits in. And what I wanted to sort of, what I thought I'd sort of start this on, and obviously we can do some questions and answers if people start joining. I'll keep it going, and what one of the things that I sort of wanted to talk about was how I got started, all the years ago that I did, you know, all them years ago, and hopefully sort of just not in too much detail, but kind of like flesh out my journey into Magento, and how because I understand my subscriber base is and my channel is aimed towards beginners and people starting out, and in the UK we call them junior developers, you know, so those types of people. And I thought it might be interesting as someone who regards themselves as experienced in, you know, not just Magento but the industry as a whole. I thought, you know, I can put a bit of information out there, and this is sort of I don't know, what would you call it, rant form, podcast form, but right, I'm just going to jump on, and I'm just going to share my I'm not going to worry too much about who's watching, because we'll just see how this goes. I'm just going to go to, so hopefully that works. Brilliant. Right, so how I started out in Magento, and I think this is sort of analogous to how a lot of people start out in Magento, and you start getting, essentially, first of all, you start getting interested in Magento. You find out from somebody, usually, you know, what is this Magento, or you get a request when you're a sort of a freelancer or something like that, and you know, from a prospective client, and say, can you build me an e-commerce store? So you bash it into a search engine, and Magento, WordPress, these things start coming up. When I started out, it was 2009. WordPress was still pretty young. WooCommerce didn't exist to the effect that it exists today. Magento was on its earliest builds. The first time I picked it up, it was on 1.6. It might have even been 1.5. And I was tasked with building a you know, fully fledged store for a business that I was working with. And it was one of those things where I'd been working in web development for a couple of years. So since sort of 2006 for some bigger companies, and I'd been learning, you know, I'd been coding in ASP, and obviously markup languages like HTML and CSS and JavaScript were always being used. So I sort of cut my teeth in those areas. But as soon as I sort of got hold of these open source platforms, I thought to myself, I've got to get out of working for someone. I've got to do this for myself, because I could just see an opportunity there for being able to build something for myself. So as it turned out, the first thing I did was I went freelancing, and from freelancing I sort of started. I did that for about 6 months, and you know, I built a few contacts, and one of the most useful contacts, here's a tip, one of the most useful types of contacts you can get as a freelance dev, if that's your game, if dev's your game, for me, it's a designer. If you can partner up with a designer, then you're golden, because they're the ones that are able to sometimes get their foot in the door of places, and sell to, you know, to that end client. But they're not a salesperson in the way that they sort of, because I've worked with salespeople as well who just sell websites and then fuck off and leave you to it. They're always involved in the project, and if you're a freelancer and they're a freelancer, then they do a lot of the client management, and you essentially work for them, but you can get some nice work that way. Especially if you find designers who are a little bit tech savvy, and there's been a couple I've worked with over the years which I still sort of talk to this day, and if I was ever to go freelancing again, those are the people that I'd be back in touch with. So that's one of my biggest tips for freelancing, because obviously there's you can do things like you can go on freelancer websites. Elance was one of the ones I used to use. I think that's Upwork, and you can get gigs, but the direct to the client most of the time. And most of the time they want stuff dirt cheap. They want you as cheap as possible. And obviously when you're freelancing, and particularly if you've got no work and you're just cutting your teeth and you're just getting used to it, then that is a good place to start. So I think freelancing, particularly if you're a beginner to Magento particularly, and you're working on open source and you're getting used to it and you're watching tutorials to death, one of the main things that you have to keep hold of is that you are at the bottom. You are starting at the bottom, and you've got to cut your teeth. And there's a couple of ways you can go from freelancing. Either you can join an agency. I mean, you could just jump the freelancing spot and join an agency at a low level, sort of. I'm thinking below junior. I'm thinking apprentice. If you've got no experience, and jump straight into an agency and learn your trade that way. I would say out of the two, you're probably going to learn more as a freelancer, because agency work, obviously I work for an agency now, and I've worked for agencies and worked with many agencies in the past. There's a lot of protocol and procedure, and there will obviously be a body of work there, a legacy body of work that's been built in a certain way, and you're going to be learning how to develop applications, websites and stuff for that agency, rather than for yourself. So the learning curve is going to be a lot of it is going to be taken up by for working with an agency, for working with that particular agency. Now, once you get into that agency life type of mentality, you will be able to bounce between agencies, and you'll be able to obviously advance your career in that way as well. One of the other things you can do is, if you get good, and this is sort of the path that I travelled, was growing into a team. So essentially employing a second. And the way I used to do it was, I used to get an apprentice. I used to see it as being a master and an apprentice. I would never have been able to put up a salary for anybody, because everything I was earning was my salary. And when you're freelancing, you're charging by the hour. Your time is your salary, and you generally don't have anything to spare. So an apprentice is a good way to go, and then you can mould them into the type of developer that works best with you. Whether that be in your future, you're looking at starting an agency, and they're going to be one of the founder members of the agency, or you're just looking at just a partnership, and you're sort of gonna share work and grow that partnership. So that is obviously a realistic way to go once you start getting sort of good at that type of thing. The other aspect is probably more for the experienced. So and this is contracting, and this is probably you're gonna find that route really, or you're gonna be going from like freelancing to agency to contracting, and probably backward and forward between contracting and agency. Contracting, obviously, the wages are ridiculous. Like the hourly rates are ridiculous. In the UK, you can get up to, like, if you're certified in Magento, which I could talk about in a second, you're looking at like 550 a day, pounds, that is. So it's ridiculous. Now, I don't understand how agencies, because obviously you're contracting via a contractor to an agency, and I don't understand how agencies can balance that. It's mercenary. It's ridiculous. So there's that option. But my opinion of contracting, and it is only my opinion, is that it's going to be short-lived for you, because budget is going to run out very fast. And also, unless you're on top of your game, to use a football analogy, unless you're scoring every week, and you're not making any mistakes, then people are going to be able to just get rid of you, and you're going to be able to sort of you're going to have to like start again with another agency. So I think contracting, unless you are mega experienced in Magento, and I'm talking like a decade plus, and you understand the game and you've worked in all aspects of the industry, then contracting it ain't going to be for you. So that's just a quick overview of like my path really. At the minute I'm employed, and I'm employed in a position where I'm a senior and I'm a leader. So that brings me on to building teams in Magento. And the reason I wanted to start talking about building teams is because in the UK in 2022 it is pretty much, it seems like a pretty much impossible task, and I think it's the pandemic's fault, which a lot of things are down to the pandemic. But from an individual's perspective, if you're a developer, we've never had so much work, right? There's never been so much work out there. But from a employer's perspective, that means that the talent pool has completely diminished in terms of who's available and people that are available. Our agency, we cannot, for the life of us, get any decent applications in for Magento developers. Everybody seems to be either in a job or contracting or doing well freelancing, and the talent pool has completely dried up. Which obviously, as I say, for individual developers, that's a brilliant thing. That's brilliant for those individuals. But for someone, or for an agency or an enterprise of any sort who wants to build a team, it's impossible. It's nearly impossible. So what do you do, and why is it? And I think there's a couple of things. Obviously, I see it as analogous to probably bricklayers after World War II. Like, everything just needed rebuilding. After the pandemic, there was a massive influx of e-commerce, obviously, and businesses moving to e-commerce, knee-jerk reactions to moving to e-commerce, and I think that left people with, or businesses and merchants with half-finished stuff and sort of stuff that needs now supporting ongoing. And that's one of the things with Magento. That's one of the traps, I think, with Magento from a merchant's perspective, is once you've got one, you need the maintenance on it, and you can't just sort of leave them. There's upgrades every 6 months, and that maintenance, the sort of hourly rate, if you like, for that maintenance has shot up, the price of that, because of the price of the salaries of the developers. Now, I did a quick check into salaries in the UK, and I was surprised, and I'm going to come on to this structure in a minute, but. Well, actually, I'll talk about the structure now. So these are the people, these are the positions within businesses that I think you need one of, at least, to have a healthy dev team. And from top to bottom, we've got senior lead developers, senior developers, lead developers, developers, and junior developers. And junior developers, I'll bundle them up with apprentices. So those are people that are not only junior to Magento for me, they're junior to web development, and they're probably on the younger side of sort of 20, if you like, or early 20s. So they're cutting their teeth. They've maybe come out of university, they maybe come out of college or even school, and they're trying to learn how to get a foothold on this industry. And one of the best ways, if you're that age, is to be honest, get into an agency what has senior developers that can guide you, and probably take that up on an apprenticeship as well. Now, the difference here, I've differentiated, because you might think, well, what's the difference between a senior developer and a lead developer? And then, obviously, a senior lead developer. Well, lead developers, for me, are the people that are the point person on that project. So they can be the expert. So a developer could be just a developer of 2 years to 5 years experience can be a lead developer on a particular project. If it's the type of software, industry, the type of project, the type of client that they're used to, and they have got then junior developers beneath those, but beneath them. So senior developers for me are then just, they've got years in the bank. They're more experienced. So they're the type of developers that have, they're probably by default more experienced in even in this type of software that a lead developer or developer is, it might be their absolute expertise, but a senior developer should have enough experience because they've probably worked across a number of different, and I'm going to call them situations, because that's the thing. Senior developers have seen a lot more situations, and they've seen a lot more situations across all different platforms and all different types of clients, all different types of businesses, and it just makes them a really well-rounded developer, basically. So I would put them above as a lead developer, just a standard lead developer. And then you've got a senior lead developer who is a senior developer who likes to lead on projects, because some senior developers, they like their comfort zones, and they'll, they could be a senior front end developer, but they don't want to touch back end. They might be a senior back end developer and they just can't write front end code markup. They've never done it. They're a programmer. Because of their age, because they've got 10, 15 years in the bank, they might have started on, C years ago, or like I did on ASP years ago, and moved into open source. So we're more programmers than we were sort of web developers as we sort of see them nowadays, which are obviously more experienced in, because they have to be, in HTML and CSS and markup languages, because CSS, HTML, they aren't programming languages, they're markup languages. So those are how your teams break down. Now, if you want to buy these people in, you're talking a lot of money onto your payroll. So if you want this team, then it's going to cost you. So I've just I had a look on Total Jobs before I came on the stream. And I did a Google for junior. I Googled the word is embargoed on this channel, and I will be fanning myself for using it. I did a search for web developer, different web developer jobs if I was a person putting together a team. And trust me, I am trying to put together a team, and it's fucking rock hard. Now, Magento Developer. Now, I don't know what everyone's earning, but. And this is across a decent sample size. So this is across 43 jobs, and I've looked on other sites as well. So this is Total Jobs. I've looked on Indeed and others. Now 62 grand a year to employ a Magento developer, and that isn't senior Magento developer, although I'd expect him to be. And as I say, this is an average. Obviously, the lower end 42, like 60. If you can get someone for 42, 45 grand, that's going to come to you under the current market, in the current market. Good luck. I don't know why they would come to you if they can go anywhere and get a baseline or an average of 62 grand a year. That is ridiculous. Now, when I was building my team, even when I got my agency to the point we had 8 people, it was a Magento specialist agency. That's what we did. Obviously, I was leading things because I had the most experience, but I was, at that point, not just employing juniors. Excuse me, some of my juniors had become like actual fully fledged Magento developers. And I was partnering with contractors and other people that I knew within the business. Now, I would have paid for a permanent member of staff, top end, 45k a year. That's what I would have paid for what we would have called I would have wanted lead. I would have wanted someone that can take a project and can manage others on that project and manage a team. Now, I was never a fan of just letting one developer build a Magento site on their own, because all of that knowledge is in their head then. Everything is it's up there in one person's head. And I found that dangerous. And I've known agencies really struggle with that sort of way of doing things, and really struggle with the sort of continual maintenance of that project if that person leaves. But it even happens if that person's just unavailable because of scheduling reasons. So you do need a mixture, and I always would have a lead developer and then maybe a specialist developer. So there might not even be a Magento developer, there could be a front end developer skinning up certain things on the front end and doing things that are in their wheelhouse. Magento developer would always be the lead, and when I mean Magento developer, I'm not talking front end, back end, I'm talking Magento developer. I think when you're talking about a Magento developer, there's no such thing as front end and back end. You are a Magento developer. You should know Magento. A Magento has a front end, a Magento has a back end. You should not be specialising in one or the other, for me, personally. If you want to be a useful sort of tool for an agency, that person needs to be the lead, and then they hold it, and then you've probably got a junior developer. And the way I'd see the way I'd see it sort of in terms of a project. So we could have the Magento project here, and then we'd have the lead developer sort of here, and they would be Magento hopefully certified. They know what they're doing right through the platform, and then we'd have probably, if you're lucky, you'd have maybe a specialist. So it could be front end, it could be someone that writes integration software if the Magento you're working on something for, has got some sort of complicated stock integration or something like that, and they would be at that level. And then the level just below, always I would have, if you've got a healthy agency, you've always got a junior. And the junior's job, well, what are they going to do on this project? Well, whatever they can, whatever they're comfortable with. I would always start a junior off on the path of learning the system, learning the CMS, learning how Magento works. Because when they become a senior, or when they become a lead, so give them 2, 3, 4 years, and they become a lead, if all they've ever done is written code, the client don't ring up and ask how the code works. The client don't ring up and say, I've got a problem with my code, because the code's written, it's done. Obviously, the client will ring up and say, I found a bug, but they'll explain it in their terms, which is usually something in the admin. Oh, I'm getting an indexing issue, or I'm getting my pages aren't saving. My product, I'm getting a message, a base table not found. They'll give you the error message, what they give you from in their words. And if you've never worked on the back end of Magento, if your agency is structured in a way that juniors are just trained on code, then they're not going to be effective lead Magento developers, and they're not going to be effective in overall. They're missing out. And I would say that there's plenty of opportunity for juniors to work predominantly on page builders, building static blocks, helping add product and data imports, and all this sort of stuff that, to be honest, is below the lead developer. The lead developer don't want to be getting involved in that shit. The lead developer wants to be writing and making sure that the front end developers and your other specialists that aren't necessarily Magento developers are writing good code, and they're writing it properly, and you're sort of keeping them within the guidelines of Magento. So, and that's the structure, and that's the cycle that I believe in. And then because what will happen is that lead developer goes on holiday or something, and the client rings up with a problem, or even or your senior developer goes on holiday, because you could even have a lead developer if you're really cocky and your agency is flush. Then you'd have a lead developer, and you could have a senior developer. And the senior developer, in this sense, would maybe be doing something. They'd be drafted into the project if there's just something that they are an absolute expert in. Like they might have just done. They might just really their expertise might be in data imports. They might be really good with the client. They might just be really good talkers. They might be able to explain complex things to the client. And the lead developers maybe just leader of people and good at task management and all that type of stuff. And then obviously you have your other roles in and around this in an agency, and you have project managers. And for me, on a Magento, the project manager needs to be a system specialist. They need to be at least experienced in Magento as a system. For me, they can't just be taskers and planners. They can't just be looking at the budgets. They've got to be on the calls with the client, walking them through what can sometimes be a painful process of moving to Magento for a client, particularly if they're coming off another type of platform or what have you. And they've got to know, for me, technical. They've got to be technical. And then you've got sort of an account manager that might come in at some point. But I'm talking about on a project. This is how I would structure things. And obviously this is the core team. I could take that person out, and that at the very least you want that, right? At the very least you want that. And now how much is that going to cost you? So a senior, well, you're going to have to pay him at least 62, right? And a junior, and I couldn't find junior Magento developer, but what would I pay for a junior nowadays? A junior with, and when I'm talking junior, I'm talking now they've got to at least have, for 32, you've got to have at least 2 years experience for me, and a certificate. So the base certificate, one of the base, either preferably I'd want the solution specialist rather than the associate developer. Either or for 32, and that's the baseline there. Our agency, we couldn't get that sound. That's ridiculous. So that's going to cost you nearly 100 grand for two developers, and then you've got your project manager's salary, and a good one. You're looking at 45k for that as well in the UK. So you straight away you're over 100 grand a year. Now I don't know how much people are selling Magentos for now, but if you're selling a project for around, with this team, you can't be charging more than 30k for your project. With a team, with this team, yeah, you're looking at 60 to 90k for a Magento project, because you're probably pitching to businesses that can afford that and that require that because of the amount of resource that they're going to take out of your agency. But for this team, even for just over 100 grand's worth of salaries, you're looking at selling projects for about 30k. Yeah, let's try and make that happen. I would love to. I need to get things signed off. So Ashu has said, is there a chance to join and work with you? The only way I can see that happening at the moment with the state of the industry is if you can come in as an apprentice. I would gladly take apprentices on. I would push my bosses, owners, for the budget to get apprentices on, because you've always got to be thinking in the future. So what we're talking about here with digital is the amount of investment that's required just setting up, just having hours and bums on chairs, basically, just being able to have desk rates, and they're expensive. So then when clients are looking at the other end, and clients and merchants, they want things building, they want things maintaining and stuff, and they're looking at ridiculous hourly rates, really. But when I ran my business between 2010 and 2018, before I sold it, our hourly rate started at 40 an hour and £pounds, and in the UK, and we finished at 60 an hour. I sold the business at that point to my partners, and they carried it on. 60. Now we're up in, I won't tell you, but we're up at a different hourly rate, and those increases are due to these increases, and these increases for me are due to the pandemic. So what do we do about it? What do we do? What do we do about it if we want to build teams? Because otherwise, all we're doing is going backwards. All we are doing is becoming freelancers from an agency perspective. A team, someone who's sat in an agency comfortably. What we're doing, we're going backwards, because on one hand, we can't afford to build a team, and on the other hand, we need a team to be able to show prospective clients that we're able to take on their project, because the client's going to look at your team and go, well, who have we got? Who's going to actually be managing this? What happens when you go on holiday? So we're in catch-22 here, and I think that you've got to rethink, or certain agencies need to rethink their structure, and my gut instinct would be employ apprentices and train them up, or second people who are in apprentice type roles and learning roles, and not to be sort of ageist in any way, but these are people that are going to generally be on the younger side, because they're probably going to be still living at home. They're probably going to be able to balance working for lesser wages whilst they learn their trade, and then as soon as they learn their trade, you should have grown, because juniors can work, juniors can be charged out, they're just doing work that is below senior level, that is all they're doing. You can still charge out an hourly rate for them, because it's still valuable work for clients, and then you grow. So that for me is where, if you're a beginner with Magento, to get to my point, if you're a beginner with Magento, if you're a beginner with Magento or starting out Magento, this applies to WordPress as well. You look at WordPress Developer, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. If you're a beginner, try and get in as an apprentice. If you can afford to, try and get in at the lowest point in an agency, or try and start as a freelancer and look for work that way, and maybe partner with find other designers and get on LinkedIn and all those platforms and find designers and earn your trust in that way. So WordPress developers, a lot more a lot easier to put a team together, but you can't charge, you know, WordPresses aren't going really for the prices Magentos are in terms of the build. They're not as, they just don't seem to be as complicated. But then again, I've found them where they are most complicated. I had a conversation with a developer in my agency who I was trying to get him to come across and work with me on Magento, and he downright just refused, didn't want to be a Magento developer, and that person's a WordPress developer. And you look at that and you think, why the hell not? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Get a couple of years experience, take your exam, and you've got yourself a pay rise, quite a substantial one. So yeah, so as I say, where do we go? What has happened? And I'm guessing that bigger agencies are going to start struggling, start falling apart. But I'm talking about bigger agencies as well that are not already on the Adobe gravy train, because there are agencies out there that are on the gravy train, and those are the people, and those are the agencies that have been established for a long time. They've invested heavily in what was Magento Enterprise, putting teams together for that. They've got the avenues between now obviously Adobe, so Magento and their agency with regards to that affiliate scheme and those, you know, recommended agencies. Those are well greased, and they are going to continue. And they're going to continue, you know, on Magento Cloud, which I know somebody who's gone to work for an agency who's experienced open source all the career, and now they're working with cloud. Said it's brilliant. Certain, I don't work with that. It's not my bag. I want to stay. I started open source and I want to stay open source. But those agencies are set. I'm worried about the agencies what have got big clients that are on open source, and there are websites out there that, or there are businesses out there, big businesses that are on open source Magento because they are trapped on it. And and the only other option is going to Shopify, and I wouldn't recommend that. I would not recommend that. So those people, I think, those agencies are going to struggle, and I think they need to be more realistic on how they recruit, and that would be investing and also giving those apprentices, those youngsters, time as well. There's a growth curve with them. Obviously, if you're picking someone up from zero experience, you're going to have to expect to spend some money on those, training them, if that's not in senior developer resources or jobs taking longer than you're quoting, but they're going to a junior, and there's all sorts of benefits for that. And then eventually, and everyone always does, if you've got good enough seniors and good enough leaders and good enough trainers within, and people who are influential enough leaders, those people are going to start to become profitable. And then there's a sweet spot within an agency within that period for that young developer or that beginner developer. Again, I don't want to just say young developer, but that beginner developer. And that sweet spot is when they've got a year's experience to 3 years experience. Because what happens is they become profitable, because they've still not had that salary bump, they've still not had that salary kick, and they're still, unfortunate, and I'm speaking from a position of experience because I've been through this journey, but also I've seen the junior developers. I've trained a lot of junior developers in many different agencies, and before they become self-aware, it's before they become self-aware, and they're always a little bit sort of, what's the word, like self-conscious. Are they doing things right? They're aware that they're having to have daily calls with their senior. They're aware that they're still training, and bit by bit, as they get better and better, that ebbs away, and it's around the 3-year mark, and suddenly they become self-aware. Suddenly they're Skynet, and they're going, I could go and I could triple my salary. And that's when you've got to let them go, or you pay them. But by that point, they should have helped you build clients, build websites, and by that point, you don't wait till 3 years until they want to fuck off. What you do is, you get a conveyor belt, you get the next young person in after a year, and you train them, and you get the next young person in, and it's a conveyor belt, and that keeps your agency going. It's the same if anybody's a football fan. Every football team, every good football team, and the best football teams have the best academies, and they have got the youth players coming through. If they're not getting sold for... you are right, Yeah, I've just had a chat comment. Yeah, you were right. Spending on beginner will get you benefit. Absolutely, it will, and I'm well up for it. And I know at the moment it ain't my money, but it's been my money in the past, and I've invested that money in people, and I've personally benefited from their progression from young beginner Magento developers. And they don't just have to. They could learn anything. They could learn Vue. They could learn JavaScript on the side. They could Magento, WordPress. You could just get them, just fill their heads because they're blank slates. This is the other thing, the other fallacy. Let's buy in a senior and just give them a few clients. They're going to have their own biases, and sometimes they're going to rub other seniors up the wrong way because they do things differently. They don't deploy the same thing. There's all these other problems that come out of jumping straight for the big players. Like you say, with a football analogy, you've got them youth coming through, and the ones that are great, you will pay them, you will give them a new contract after 5 years, and suddenly they're earning the same as Cristiano Ronaldo. Or maybe not him, but other players. And if they're not going to cut it, then you sell them. So they go and find their own path. But you've got to give them the time, and you've got to give them, for me, at least a year. So if anybody who's running teams out there is trying to build a team and struggling, that's my advice, and that is the point of this talk. Right, well, that's been my usual rant, and obviously I really appreciate the people who've watched, and I hope that it's gives someone some sort of idea on, and I hope I've imparted some valuable knowledge, and that is a wrap, really. That's the end of that stream. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you